So today we're going to talk about perhaps the biggest drama that competitive Valorant has seen so far. And that is in the game here between XSET and FPX. It is the final round, 12-11, of the final map of this best of 3. It's 1-all in maps, it's 12-11 to FPX, it's as close as you can get, and we're in a 2v3 retake for FPX who are on the defense side, and everything is going to kick off because of this Killjoy turret that is on your screen. Because what's going to happen is this Killjoy turret here is going, as you can see, the two FPX players are over here, right? But this Killjoy turret is going to fire off as if it sees someone back towards heaven. Okay, you see it kind of goes 1 2 1, right, as it sees Angel, and he kind of gets like behind the turret a bit and it fires off. And obviously this gives misinformation to the XSET players here, and you can see this guy is looking towards heaven, Def here. They destroy the turret, and now FPX are going to win this 2v3 retake. You can see that XSET are still looking towards heaven, perhaps expecting, someone's about to swing at any moment. But in fact, that is not the case, and they, lose the round there, okay? And so FPX win the game. We're all happy. Game over. Done, sorted. XSET, unfortunately, are eliminated from the tournament. FPX go on to play in their next match, and everything is fine. However, this then comes out from Riot about an hour or so after the game has finished. In the final round of the match, a bug caused the Killjoy turret to fire in the wrong direction. This resulted in false information that directly led to an XSET player looking in the wrong direction and had a high level of potential impact on XSET losing the round and match. The final round will be replayed. Now, there is a bit more context to add to the situation as well, as this was just kind of extra fuel for the fire, because in their game prior to this one, XSET lost to Optic, and in that game, after that game, in the post-match interview, one of their players said the only mind games that Optic use are finding ways to tech pause during big rounds. Now, they did come back and apologize after saying this, and kind of said, oh, it was a heat of the moment, kind of thing, after a big loss, right? We were just frustrated or whatever. But obviously, this did not help in the kind of optics of the whole situation, that XSET, were complaining basically about, they were being a bit sore losers perhaps, and then they come back and get a decision in their favor to go and replay a round after the game has ended. Now, I just want to clearly state that the XSET players and coaching staff said that they had nothing to do with this decision, that they didn't appeal to Riot, that they didn't talk to it about Riot, that Riot made this decision completely on their own, and that, they were just kind of innocent bystanders caught up in this whole mess as well. But nonetheless, here we were, right, in round 24 again, and replaying this round, and obviously what had to happen was, of course, XSET had to win, right, because it couldn't just be simple and FPX win the round again and it's all good and everything's fine. Of course, XSET would have to go on and win this round. But what I'm going to just talk about now is basically the different points of view, right? And so let's start with XSET, and I'll go on, a bit of a ramble here as we just watch the game actually play out. But obviously, from XSET's point of view, this essentially was a lose-lose, right? They have a second chance to go and win the tournament. They're competitive people. They want to win the tournament, right? So they're not going to turn down that chance to go and win. The problem is, of course, if they were to go on to win this game, and spoiler if you don't know, but FPX would go on to eventually win, thank God. But of course, if XSET did go on to win the game, obviously then everyone is probably, or a lot of people are going to be calling them cheats, right? A lot of people are going to say they don't deserve it. I mean, heaven forbid they would have actually gone on to win the whole tournament, because then a lot of people would have been, very upset that they didn't deserve this situation, right? But as we saw, the XSET players and staff are saying that, they had nothing to do with this situation. So, it's just a mess for XSET, really, right? They can't win in this situation, right? Either they have to kind of, not compete, which is probably, deeply against how they, want to feel. Of course, they want to compete. And, it was a bug that they got wrongly punished for, I guess, in a way. And then this didn't help as well, by the way. There was like a 10-minute tech pause. I guess I'll skip through this because this this didn't help either. After that first round, there was a 10-minute tech pause, and it's now like 2:30 in the morning. It's really getting late at this point. I did think, like, if that tech pause lasted an hour, right, when do you call it a day, right? I just thought that was an interesting thing. But anyway, yeah, from XSET's point of view, of course, there is no winning. I mean, either they're always going to be somewhat villains in this story, you know, and especially with that added context as well, you know, it just wasn't a great situation for them. For FPX, of course, they were pissed, right? And of course they were pissed, right? And one of the main reasons I think that they were, you know, rightfully so pretty angry is because, you know, this has happened to a lot of teams, right? There is a lot of teams and players that came out after the fact and said, hold on a minute, what about this bug that happened in our game, right? Can we get a replay for our game, right? What's going on? So for FPX, you know, and I'm sure it's maybe happened to them as well, where they're like, hold on, there was a bug in this game that we played. We didn't get a replay there, right? That they must have been thinking, why are we the team that's getting punished, right? Why are we kind of the first example of this happening in this game when, you know, pros have pointed out, you know, well, this happened in our game here and, you know, this happened in their game there, right? And so, you know, I can understand why FPX were rightfully, you know, pretty angry. And obviously having to be dragged out of bed to play a game, and a game that you think you've already won, you know, I can understand. Now, thankfully, little thing that's going to continue to happen here is Zipan is going to go crazy. The man is a vampire, and he, you know, is going to, like, really carry FPX through this time. You know, of course, as mistakes are being made left and right, because everyone is so tired at this point. I mean, they'd already played a super tiring series, and now to go into, you know, do this in the early hours of the morning is just ludicrous. But, you know, yeah. Anyway, from FPX's point of view, of course, you can understand why they would be so angry, and I completely understand from their perspective. And then from Riot's point of view, and I think this is obviously the big one, let's talk about Riot's perspective and what's going on there. So obviously, Riot made this decision, and I can understand why they made the decision, right? Because they're kind of just following their own rule book, right? What the rules say, you know, it kind of applies, right? You know, if there's a bug that has a potential big impact on a round, you know, you replay the round. I mean, that seems fair enough, right? I'm sure everyone agree. Yeah, that sounds like a good rule. And of course, they're just trying to, you know, essentially follow their own rules at that point. And obviously, if they don't follow their own rules, that brings into question everything else, right? You know, the integrity of the competition starts to decrease if, you know, they just decide not to follow their own rules or whatever. So, of course, you can understand why they did want to, you know, continue to follow their own rules, right? It makes sense. But I think there is a couple problems with what they did. One, I think, was the timing of it, right? I think it would have been a bit more acceptable if that statement would have come out, you know, earlier, right? If it came out 5-10 minutes after the game, you know, I think that would have been more acceptable than, you know, it coming, you know, an hour or so, whatever it was after the game, right? You know, if that would have been communicated to everyone, you know, very soon after, I think that would have been a bit more acceptable overall. The second thing, of course, is, as I was kind of mentioning before, they kind of opened Pandora's box, where it's like, where do you draw the line on this, right? What is, like, you know, the rule is open for somewhat of interpretation. And as I said, there are other pros in games being like, well, hold on, what about our game here, right? Why didn't we get a replay for that, right? And there's going to be a lot of situations, of course, like that. And it's like, if FPX were winning 12-1, would they have, would they have replayed it, right? I don't know. And then if your answer is no to that question, like, what score does it have to be to, you know, be worth having a replay, right? Does it have to be, you know, 12-8, 12-9? How close does it have to be, right? Does it have to be on map 3, right? All of these things, right? Like, at what point do you need to do it? And would they have done it, you know, if, you know, it was 12-0 and FPX were just absolutely dominating, right? Maybe not. But yeah, you end up in situations like that, and as I said, like, what bug counts as big, right? There's a common, you know, that KO knife bug where it doesn't show the correct amount of people, right? That one's kind of a hard one to determine how big of an impact on a round does that have, right? It can be weird in situations like that, right? So I don't know. It kind as I said, they opened up a can of worms. Here's Zipan going crazy again. And so it's kind of a weird situation overall here for Riot, where you can understand why they made this decision. I think there was some mistakes by them, and I think perhaps they, you know, need to clarify the rules, right, and try and make it really as black and white as they can so that there, you know, isn't really complaints. I also think, you know, they could have made sure to let everyone know that, you know, this was their decision and it wasn't XZ's decision, because XZ got, you know, a lot of, you know, hate that they probably didn't deserve for that before they kind of clarified the situation. Then FPX players got a lot of hate for hating on XZ, because obviously FPX probably thought that it was the XZ players who, you know, talked to Riot. And so, you know, they perhaps should have communicated a bit clearly as well. and perhaps, had, protocols for this kind of situation, was playing it at, 2:30 in the morning, getting the casters to come back out, right? The desk had to come back out at 2:30 in the morning, right? All the players, of course, as well. Was that the right decision? I think they will learn from this situation, and so hopefully we won't end up in this kind of mess again. Thankfully, Xset didn't win, and I say that not as a besmirch of the Xset players, but it would have been a bit more of a problem, I think, if Xset did manage to win this game. And thankfully, FPX by winning have kind of this thing hopefully will blow over, and no one will really be that bothered about it, and it'll just kind of everyone will move on. But had Xset won this game, as I said, it would have been a bit more of a problem. Now, thankfully, FPX, and we can just watch the last round. In fact, let's just quickly watch Zekken do this, because I thought, oh my god, they're going to win FPX, we're going to go home, and then of course Zekken did that, which wasn't great. But then we finally did get the last round coming in here, as FPX would finally manage to win, as we end up in this kind of weird scenario where Xset get kind of stuck just in there on B site, and everyone kind of just pauses, and it's kind of weird, and they wait here on site for like 30 seconds and it was just like adding to the tension of, oh my god, this is going to go even further. We're in round 30 at this point, right? Everything's going crazy, but thankfully they would manage to win the situation. Xiao gets a nice kill with a Fade Horn, and FPX would go on to win. And so my hope from this situation, as again Zipan goes big, because of course he does, my hope from this situation is that Riot can learn from it, right? Perhaps communicate a bit more clearly, with less time in between it all, right? So that people aren't playing at 2:30 in the morning, and perhaps can clear up the rules as well. Maybe that'll force them to look at the rule book and really make sure it's as black as white as it can be. Thankfully, a major drama was avoided, but still, this was probably the biggest drama we've seen so far in Valorant.